We've just interrupted Sam's life, temporarily put him into a sort of suspended animation. Now, when Sam woke up this morning, he probably thought today was going to be just another normal day. And so it will, except that through his day, we'll be watching. And with the equipment in this ethereal laboratory, we'll be measuring and recording to get a picture of the inner workings of Sam's body, his physiology, during a normal day in his life. But first, already there have been some interesting internal changes happening when he woke up. So let's go back and have a look. Even an ordinary day makes amazing demands on the body. Each day is really one long balancing act, not only keeping all the vital processes under tight control, things like circulation, breathing and the nervous system, but especially that most critical balance between energy intake and energy use. How well will Sam cope? For good scientific reasons, it's important that we don't disturb him too much. We want to keep him stress-free. He's looking pretty unstressed at the moment. A good chance to get some idea of his resting heart rate. It's fairly low, looks about 50. But as soon as the alarm rings and he wakes, the rate shoots up, about 72. Now that rapid rise is partly a response to the shock of the alarm. It's overshot a bit. But now it's settling down to a steady but higher rate, ready for the demands that his body's going to make just in getting up. And what about fuel for the day's efforts? Well, it's pretty unlikely that his energy demands will remain constant throughout the day, and his energy intake certainly won't. Inside the body, his most immediate source of energy is sugar, glucose in fact, carried around in the blood, and the level of that can be measured very easily. He's pretty lethargic at the moment, so energy demand will be low. But it's a long time since he refueled. He didn't have a heavy meal last night, so the level of sugar in his blood should be pretty low, near resting levels. And yes, it's around 4 millimoles per litre, the level needed for general body maintenance. While Sam was getting dressed, I was having the same measurements made on me, heart rate and blood sugar level, because I'm going to be that vital experimental feature, the control. And for that to work, I'm going to have an extremely restful day. All my values will be uncluttered by the demands of exercise, and my body will be running at roughly maintenance level all day. That's right, 70 is about the right level for my age. And my blood sugar level should be about that of Sam's resting rate, 4 millimoles per litre. But back to Sam.
Holidaymakers are still facing long delays in the wake of the Spanish air traffic controller strike, which ended yesterday morning. About 4,500 people spent the night at Gatwick Airport, where some
Sam's about to fuel himself up by eating breakfast. He's about to take in a certain quantity of energy, mostly sugar and protein with some fat.
The weather, northern Britain will have sunny intervals and a few light showers. The best sunshine to the west.
We need to know exactly how much of each he's going to eat if we're going to build up an energy budget for his day. So, while Sam's off to get his milk, let's quickly replace his breakfast with exactly weighed amounts of each ingredient. One 70-gram egg. And some orange juice. Well, the orange juice seems a bit sharp. We'll just boost his glucose levels by sweetening it up a bit. 2 spoonfuls should do it. 30 grams. Oh, and he's having some toast as well.
Because of flooding and new toxicity. So passengers normally traveling to Manchester via this route should now go via Sheffield if you fancy it.
While he's eating, we can get on with working out the first stage of that energy budget and estimate the amount of energy in each bit of food that Sam's eating. Of course, I'm getting exactly the same breakfast. I have to have the same input if I'm to be the control. Now, to find out how much available energy is in this lot, in kilojoules when it's oxidized in the body, we more or less have to do just that, to oxidize the stuff. And the simplest way to do that is to burn it and to measure the amount of heat produced. And that's exactly what Bob is going to do with David to some of this dried egg protein while I'm eating my breakfast. Of course, they can't use any of my actual breakfast, otherwise I wouldn't have the same input as Sam. They're going to use a bomb calorimeter. They'll put in an exact amount of egg into the bomb. The bomb is really just a lump of metal that will absorb the heat produced from the burning of the egg, and any change in temperature shows up on the screen. If the whole sample is burnt instantaneously, we can calculate the amount of heat generated and the number of joules produced per gram of egg. And finally, the whole thing is flushed through with pure oxygen.
Okay, ready to fire?
Ready?
Don't worry, Barry, it won't bang. Right, fire.
Okay, David, what's happened?
Well, the temperature's gone up. Jolly nearly 1 degree.
So, 0.1 grams of egg produced a 1 degree rise in temperature. That must take 1.7 kilojoules of energy. That means the whole egg is worth 850 kilojoules. And of course, the rest of the ingredients of the breakfast, the milk, the toast and so on, can be measured in exactly the same way. Well, it's getting on for 7:30, and I think Sam's finished his breakfast. What's he up to now? It looks like Sam's about to go off for a spot of exercise. It's a bit soon after breakfast, but I suppose it's the only time he gets, leading such a busy life. Anyway, let's quickly have another look at his heart rate before he goes. It's about 65. And what's mine, David?
Well, it's still the same, 70-ish.
So there's not that much difference between us at the moment. Now, what about the fate of all our breakfast? Has any of that food energy been used yet? Well, let's check the blood sugar levels. With Sam out on his run, it's a bit less hectic now, so there's time to see this done. The simplest way is to take a small blood sample using a special indicator stick and to read the level of a glucose analyzer. And this is the bit that I don't really enjoy.
Don't worry, Barry. This won't hurt a bit.
Of course, we're taking a sample from Sam at the same time, but he won't know it's been done. Lucky devil.
Well, Sam's is 5, but yours is 6. You're both higher than the values before breakfast, which means that the glucose must have got into the blood very quickly. We're going to need samples from you both pretty often.
I was afraid of that. Anyway, let's see how Sam's getting on. Well, he's been running for nearly 15 minutes now. His heart rate has gone up much higher, about 120. I don't think he's pushing himself that hard today, because at full tilt it could go up to 150 or even higher. But it still looks like pretty hard work. I'm glad I'm taking it easy. Mine's still about 70. From the blood sugar measurements, we know how much fuel is available in the blood, but to get an idea of how fast Sam's using his energy supplies, we need to measure his oxygen uptake, the rate at which oxygen is being used by his metabolism. Now, it's really the same idea as using the bomb calorimeter, except that it's inside the body. Now, this is a bit more complicated than using a blood sample, so I think we should interrupt Sam's run and bring him back here to this special laboratory.
Hold on, Barry. We've got to get some values from you first. Now, just breathe into this. Now, even just sitting here, you're using up energy, and the result, the oxygen used, carbon dioxide produced, will be apparent in your exhaled breath. If we know the gas flow rate and the oxygen content of your breath, which is 16.8%, that means that you're using up around 400 mils of oxygen each minute. And that's actually more than you were using before your meal, even though you're not doing anything more energetic.
Okay. Let's get Sam back here. It's his turn now.
Okay, we need a few breaths for the analysis. Meanwhile, I'll just take a quick blood sample. Okay, I've finished with him. You can send him back.
We'll leave Sam running for a bit longer and see what results we've got.
Well, his oxygen uptake is 2750 mils per minute, nearly 3 litres a minute. And that's about 7 times as much as yours. Sam needs all that extra oxygen to provide the extra power for his muscles. All that strenuous exercise means that more fuel is burnt, and therefore more oxygen is used. Now, Sam's blood glucose level is 5.1. That's still rising a bit, though not as fast as yours. And in fact, yours, Barry, is 7.15.
Well, why's that?
Well, Sam's blood glucose level is low because he's working so hard. He's burning up glucose so fast that his breakfast input hasn't had a big effect. But you, just sitting there doing nothing, well, your breakfast input is still shoving the level right up to 7 and even more. In fact, you'll be storing away some of it as liver glycogen.
Well, it's getting on for 8:30. Sam should be on his way to work. I think he'd better hurry if he's not going to be late. Well, he just made it. He deserves a rest to recover from all his exertions. And it gives us a chance to get some more values, some after-exercise readings.
His oxygen consumption is dropping. It's down to 1,100 mils per minute. Still more than Barry, of course, because even though he stopped running, he's still got an oxygen debt to pay off. His blood glucose level has dropped too, down to 4.5 millimoles per litre. But then, so has Barry's. He's now 5.75. But of course, it's a fair while for both of them since they fueled up with food at breakfast time.
So, let's leave Sam on his way to work and recap on what's happened so far this morning. We've taken a collection of values for Sam at rest before breakfast, after his breakfast refueling, pre-exercise, during exercise, and at rest again after exercise. And of course, at the same time, a set of control readings from me just sitting here. It looks like Sam's having a busy morning at the office.
You'll take that. That's good. Okay, thanks very much. Bye-bye.
now, it must be getting on for lunchtime. It looks like beer and sandwiches. And of course, as control, I have to have the same. Lunch is the second fueling of the day, and again we can measure the energy value in this lot and add it to the running total of energy intake. Cheers. Of course, there are some differences, but effectively we're repeating breakfast. So to speed things up a little, let's put time into fast forward for a while. The fuel loading, the physiological responses, and the measurement regime for the afternoon will be much the same as this morning. Although he's not being as energetic as his after-breakfast jog, he's still pretty busy, and even office work burns up a lot of fuel. Well, I expect Sam's going out for some supper now. Another refueling, just like breakfast and lunch, and then he'll be dashing off home. So, as Sam winds down after a hard day's work, we can see how the day has gone, not only for him, but for me too. But before we start, let's add one more factor. Bob, you've been pretty busy.
Yes, I have. As well as taking samples from you and Sam, I've been monitoring David too, so we can add his results to the overall picture. But let's look at the energy budget first, starting with food intake. You and Sam have had the same meals, so that's 3990 kilojoules for breakfast, 5040 for lunch, and 4200 for your evening meal. Now that's 13,230 kilojoules altogether on the credit side, so to speak, and David's got nil, but you haven't had anything to eat, have you?
That's right. And although I haven't been jogging, I have been rushing around taking all the measurements. This means that we can compare resting, well-fed Barry with hard-working, well-fed Sam and starved, overworked me. Now, the oxygen and carbon dioxide measurements that we've been making during the day have been used to calculate our energy usage. So let's have the debit figures. Now, Sam's used the most, I've used rather less, and Barry has used the least. This means that Barry has been storing glucose as glycogen in his liver, while Sam, who's actually ended up with a deficit, will have drawn on reserves from a previous day.
So these are the totals for the day, but look at the pattern of my metabolic rate during the day. Now, why does it fluctuate?
Well, you're seeing the effect of food intake. Just after the body's been fueled by a meal, particularly a high-protein one, there's a real peak in metabolic rate. This is because the products of protein breakdown actually stimulate a whole lot of carbohydrate breakdown as well. And in between meals, any excess carbohydrate is tucked away as liver glycogen. And this is what we've been doing all day, following the fate of carbohydrate with our blood sugar measurements. The changes were most obvious just in that couple of hours after breakfast. So let's have those plotted.
Well, we all started the day with blood glucose levels around the resting value of 4. So let's compare your curve, Barry, as that mythical creature, the typical resting man, with Sam.
Well, it's clear that Sam and I are pretty different. My curve rises faster than his and reaches a higher peak.
Yes, that's because for most of the time Sam was exercising. His level doesn't rise as fast as yours at the start because glucose was being rapidly withdrawn from the blood into his cells at the same time as it was being fed in from his gut. It's rather like trying to fill a bath with a plug out.
And notice how Sam's level comes back down to the baseline a bit before yours, Barry. That's while Sam was sitting on the train. And then it overshoots. And in fact, later, it would come on back up to the resting level.
OK, let's put in David's figures and compare them. They're pretty steady.
Well, that's the response to demand exceeding supply. See, glucose is being mobilized from the glycogen stores in my liver to supply my cells. It's really the opposite of what's going on inside your liver. You see, physiology is all a question of balance. Homeostasis, the body constantly balancing supply and demand, not only of glucose, but of a multitude of other things as well.
Well, I'm sure you'll soon replace those stores of glycogen, while I'm going to have to work off that pub lunch sometime. For all of us, every day is a tough proposition for our bodies to cope with. That we do cope is due to the subtle physiological processes that keep each of us running at optimal performance. For Sam, tomorrow's bound to be another testing day. But we'll not be watching.